Cleveland Browns are currently 2-8, and there is a million questions that all of you would like answered and discussed about this team. We'll start with some of them on your latest Locked On Browns, which starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGBNELOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, look, I know you're all a bunch of sour individuals. We're all a bunch of sour individuals. Doesn't mean we don't appreciate you all. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Become an everyday for yourself. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. How's everybody doing? Your host, Jeff Lloyd. We are joined by the OBR's Pete Smith. Certainly a lot to discuss. First, it's great having Pete back. Pete, fell a little bit short of the ultimate goal, but for the Streetsboro kids, a great run, going 12-0 out the box. Been a fun year and certainly a fun run for you guys all over, at Streetsboro. So again, to the kids, hell of a ride, hell of a run. You get special seasons and you don't get guaranteed special seasons, but for the kids at Streetsboro, certainly a hell of a run this year. But Pete, it's a mess right now. And you kind of got to look through and look completely through the product and try to figure out where it is. And look, you certainly have to base this team and this organization the way it's currently is. You can't just be in the now. You have to look at it over a whole, basically a whole in capture of what is now year 5. Andrew Berry and, of course, Kevin Stefanski. But Pete, this is a team that conceivably won 11 games last year and right now could conceivably lose 15. Right or wrong, these questions should come up.
Yeah, I think anytime the adage of you are what your record is, which is fine. I mean, to me, I think ultimately I view the NFL as you either make the playoffs or you don't. And the rest of it's not that important. Now, it'd be great if the Browns won a division since they haven't done it since 1989. That part is frustrating, but ultimately you're just trying to get into the tournament. And from the Browns standpoint, anything short of that was going to be a disappointment. The rest is just measuring your degrees. How upset do you want to get about that is sort of up to you, but ultimately you can draw this season. To me, I think you draw the season down to a couple major points. One, Deshaun Watson could not play. He was terrible, and now he's hurt, which brings you to the second point, which is the Browns have been crushed by injuries throughout this season. And, Sunday's game, which was really frustrating, both on defense and special teams, saw another guy go down for the year, DeJuan Jones, broken, I think they said fibula finally.
Yes.
So that's been the story of the year. I have lost track. I don't know anyone who knows the number of offensive line combinations they've had this year. When you're looking at that and you're going, where'd the run game go? Well, I'd start there. And it wasn't good last year either. The Browns run game has not been good really since Nick Chubb got hurt, but realistically even beyond that since 2022. So that is beyond Bill Callahan's offensive line wasn't good last year. The Andy Dickerson line this year isn't good. That's sort of where you're at with that. David Njoku got hurt almost immediately. That was a massive setback. And then, defensively, Myles Garrett's feet are killing him. And you see it on the field. He will not shut it down, which, I think some people are basically like, please just shut it down. He will not do that to his teammates. He's going to play as long as it is possible for him. It's sort of a code and owing it to his teammates, and the record doesn't matter. I think that's important to him. And it also makes me fundamentally reject this idea that like Myles Garrett is going to like ask his way out of Cleveland, beyond all the reasons he has, including part ownership of the Cavs. If he wanted to, he could shut it down and be like, I'm getting the surgery. I'm going to fix my feet. We'll see. He wants to play. He wants this thing to work. And I think part of the reason he does that is because he believes in what the team ultimately has, even if it's not represented in the record this year. And it's not much different from 2022 in terms of the car wreck and the shoulder and everything else. He was not himself, and the defense completely fell apart. 2021, Myles Garrett should have won, in my view, should have won Defensive Player of the Year that year. He didn't because of the record, but he was that guy. In 2021, Denzel Ward was phenomenal that year, and the rest of the defense was mostly just jamokes, and those two played so well that the Browns finished sort of in the middle of the pack. 2022, Myles Garrett is playing through pain or missing time or whatever. Defense completely dies, and they fire Joe Woods over it. And I'm not going to rehash that, but Joe Woods does earn should get more grace than he's gotten given what we're seeing right now. Same players, same issues. So that is where you sort of end up. You don't have your franchise. Myles Garrett is a franchise quarterback level player. He's playing hurt. When you don't have that, it makes a dramatic difference on the rest.
Certainly.
As you have talent. The JOK situation has been horrible for this team, and there's no clarity on that situation, but he was arguably, at worst, your third or fourth best player on the defense. They are clearly missing him. And that's just been sort of the story of the season, just dealing with the various injuries, in addition to other things, regression. This is a weird phenomenon in that kicking around the league is awful.
Absolutely.
Certainly. Like, I would love to know. I'm waiting till we get
between the Browns, the Ravens, and the Bengals. I'll count look, I don't care if the penalty bailed them out. There was 7 missed field goals between 3 kickers.
So I'm waiting till we get a what has been done to the balls type investigation, or is there some sort of dizzy bat race that every kicker has to
Are we using different air or different pumps to fill the balls this year?
You just can't, like, at some point you sit there wondering, was kicking too easy? And then the NFL decided to make it harder somehow to try to make things more interesting, as opposed to being able to automatically kick from 55 plus. And anyway, Dustin Hopkins goes from best kicking season in Browns history to cannot kick. And I'm certainly not suggesting to get rid of him any more than I'm suggesting that the Bengals or Ravens should. But that has played a role, and that has killed them in games where you're missing, in this last game, 6 points, which would have been the difference between 14-12 at half versus 14-6 at half. And there were other games where points were left off the board that would have made the difference between late game situations. And that kills you too. So there's been a lot of regression in certain areas. But like injuries, the quarterback situation has been a disaster. And the special team situation has been just a key case of regression. And yet, I believe this team can compete next year. I think that they have the talent to do that. Now, so much of that, they clearly have work to do. I don't think if Kevin Stefanski wants to fire people, that's his call. But ultimately, I see a talent problem that needs a talent solution, as opposed to a coaching problem that needs a coaching solution. They just need more guys. Age, injury, all of the things. And this season has just sort of become lost in that sense, which doesn't make it less disappointing. It's not an excuse to say that this season wasn't disappointing. All of those things are fair and accurate to say the season has been a massive disappointment. But if we're talking about what's the best path forward, that's the only question I'm interested in. Again, if you're saying Deshaun Watson is the reason Berry and Stefanski should be fired, I have no argument, that they should be fired. I have no argument against that. It was a debacle, one I argued vehemently against the entire way. But if that was the case, why does Jimmy Haslam extend them in an offseason rather than making them prove that Deshaun Watson was the guy? Clearly, he thought he likes who they have. Now, does the record or all the other stuff change his mind? I guess it's possible, but ultimately, I feel like Jimmy Haslam walks into Berea and has to step over so many bodies. He goes, this is so ridiculous. We're not doing this. We're going to try to get healthy and get back next year, as opposed to blowing it up. And, there's an apples and oranges context to this, certainly. But coming out of last season, when the Cavs got rolled again out of the playoffs, so many people wanted to blow it up in various fashions. And obviously, they changed their coach. There are people who wanted to get rid of Darius Garland, wanted to get rid of Jared Allen, wanted to give up on Evan Mobley as ever developing into a superstar type player, so on and so forth. Other than the coach, the Cavs stuck with everybody, and now they are undefeated in 15-0. Are they good enough to win a championship? No, but I do think it's worth noting that after people insisted the Cavs had to get rid of all these players, that they didn't. And I think the Browns should take the similar course. Now, they have to get more talent. They have to draft well. They have to do a whole lot of other things. But if you're asking me, is it reasonable that the Browns can be right back in the mix next year? I think the answer is absolutely. And I look at both the Steelers and Vikings as reasons to believe that is very possible. And specifically the Vikings, because we came into this season with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah on the hot seat and Kevin O'Connell as guys who are like, I don't know if these guys are making it. And now, Kevin O'Connell is arguably going to be in conversation for Coach of the Year. Kwesi is going to be in conversation for GM of the Year. There is an element of occasionally you just have to let the process work itself out and let it happen.
And this is what I do agree with, for because everybody, I don't want them to go back to the way they were. I don't want them to be insignificant for years at a time. Well, guess what? If you change the leadership, the general manager, the head coach, it's going to be, because they are going to move on from the people that are here. They're not their guys, and it will be a couple of years before they're relevant again. But there is a big question to be had, certainly about the quarterback position, and it may not even have to do with what Deshaun Watson has physically done as a player. So we're going to get to all that. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle through mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. But remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. As you get older, there's an old song line, the hangovers hurt more than they used to. It's true, folks. It truly is. But every time I have a pre-alcoholic before drinks, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on no headaches, more energy without worry, and I can go about my day the next day. So even though I'm getting older, I can still enjoy a night out or two. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. You wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you are not satisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Appreciate you all for making the show your first listen every single day. Become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcast. The OBR's Pete Smith is here. Pete, broken shoulder last year, blown Achilles this year, taking the absolute talk out of his play on the field. And that is certainly worse than both these injuries. There's no question about it. This would be an issue going into this year. We're going into 2025 regardless. But look, you got to end it. He's going to get his money. What do? You look at what's there in free agency, and it's the Sam Darnolds of the world, the Justin Fields of the world. Who knows where they'll finish? And it doesn't look like this quarterback class is going to be one where everybody's going to kind of sell their soul like last year and trade up everything they have to get into the top 10 to get quarterbacks. What's the answer, Pete, at the quarterback position in 2025?
So let's start here. Deshaun Watson's never going to play for the Browns again. And his injury recovery is going to take a lengthy amount of time. Beyond, even in the best case scenario, he's coming back from an Achilles when he's already had 2 ACLs done. And
2 ACLs, broken shoulder, Achilles, and this is a guy, I think, 28 years old, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so in the best case scenario for the style of play he has, Aaron Rodgers it doesn't look right, and he doesn't move. Kirk Cousins openly said at the beginning of the season he didn't feel right, and he doesn't move. So it's going to take a while, and then you add in the fact that there's no incentive for him to rush back to be the third string guy. Take your time. Be on the PUP list or whatever. Maybe he never comes back. He's still going to get his money, but the key for that is it's going to allow the Browns to have a roster spot for at least a while. So they're going to have to, and as far as the salary cap goes, I don't expect people to understand how the salary cap works. It's extraordinarily complicated, but the Browns have a lot more flexibility than people think they do, even though they're going to carry Deshaun Watson until 2026, where they will promptly cut him and disappear him from existence.
Well, he'll be disappeared in 2025. He will be, but he'll still,
I think he'll
technically be on paper. Yes.
So they're fine financially. It's not like it doesn't make an impact, but the Browns are going to be able to spend. And I think Jack Duffin, who should read at the OBR, has them at $186 million they could spend this offseason. I don't think they will, but could. This is why they kept restructuring, because the way roller over cap works, the Browns are really, really good at this. So they are fine. They are not the Saints. They are not in a situation where they have to be like the Broncos. They can spend and be competitive. That's the first part. So with that roster spot, I expect the Browns will have a veteran. It could be Jameis Winston. It could be somebody else. DTR and a rookie. Where that rookie is acquired, somehow in the draft, most likely, but could be post-draft after, sometime.
And just a quick preface: everybody know Pete and I will tell you bring in a rookie quarterback every year, because God forbid, maybe one out of every 10 years, one of them hits, and he found gold. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's just the process you have to go through now, because until you find your guy. But you can play reasonably competitive football and compete and win and do the things you did, because you've seen it with Jacoby Brissett and some of these other guys, Joe Flacco. The consistent theme has been Kevin Stefanski, and you're seeing it now. Jameis Winston has 2. He threw for 395 yards, no picks. He threw for 300-plus yards against the Ravens, even with all the risk, and they won that one. So 2 out of 3 games, he's been well over 300 yards. The receivers get to do all kinds of fun things, and we actually get to see them, as opposed to the Deshaun Watson slog, where it looked like the Browns had 8 guys on the field. That is certainly valuable. But so you're going to have to keep going every year until you find that guy. So if, let's say, the Browns draft a guy in round 4 or round 2, and they get into next year and they're not sure they have the answer, well, then you revisit the process. If DTR becomes the veteran starter, okay, fine. If not, maybe it's Jameis Winston again, if he was the guy in the first place, or somebody else. And maybe you have to maybe you're looking to deal DTR at that point to bring in somebody else. It would depend on what that rookie they just brought in does, but you're going to keep swinging until you ultimately find your guy. And at some point, you're going to probably find somebody in the draft where whether it's 2026 or whatever, where you are going to try to move up and use some draft capital to try to make a move. You're not, I would hope, we've learned our lesson and not try to do the Deshaun Watson type package or Trey Lance type package to get said signal caller, being a little bit more risk averse from that standpoint, but at least being aggressive when you have the opportunity there to continue to do that. While you are doing that, you are building up the rest of the roster, which, again, not that far away. I wrote an article last week, I think, which featured 10 guys on defense who are currently 26 years or younger. 7 of those are on rookie deals or free agent deals. 2 of them are extended. 1 will be on the 5th-year option, which is Greg Newsome. The idea that they don't have young talent is absurd. And I can't listen to that crap because it's insane to me. Isaiah McGuire is a good football player. JOK, obviously you have a question. Mahmoud Diabate has a lot of talent. Grant Delpit, good player. They have a lot. Mike Hall, obviously the injury now sucks, but Alex Wright will be back on the end of his rookie deal. You have a lot of these guys who are going to be around. Cam Mitchell, Ronnie Hickman. It keeps going. If those 10 guys are on the roster next year, that is basically 40% of your defensive roster who are cheap by that standard. The only contracts you have on that side of the ball that are really meaningful are Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and then Dalvin Tomlinson. All the rest of the money is on offense, and most of that money is on Deshaun Watson, and then a bunch of linemen, which are going to sort of process themselves out. Jedrick Wills is going to process himself out. Z's contract is gone. If they get rid of Posick, that could save them $6 million. If Botonio retires, that's something like $16 million. If they restructure or do something where Botonio wants to come back, I'm certainly not going to kick him out the door. Wyatt Teller, those type of guys. Jack Conklin's money's fine, but they might try to restructure him. They have a lot of opportunities to create money and keep this thing going without taking any meaningful breaks from a talent acquisition standpoint. But in part because Kevin Stefanski's been able to have success with these quarterbacks, he's going to have people who want to play here at that position. We saw this offseason with that. And you're going to have skill guys who want to play for guys that can get them the ball. And I think they're really well situated with skill guys currently at wide receiver. That doesn't mean I don't want more, but Jerry Jeudy, what we're seeing from Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore, who I think they should at least look to sign for one more year, and then a healthy David Njoku is a very good place to start on offense. The line is obviously where the bulk of the work is going to come, and that needs to be the focus. If I'm heading into the offseason, certainly quarterback is the number one priority, as always, but it's to get back to dominating the line of scrimmage. That will certainly help you in terms of running the ball, pass protection, and controlling the clock, which gets you back to being a team that, the team that people want them to be, and gives them more diversity on offense. I think those are all achievable goals through free agency as well as the draft.
All solid points. And if you notice, Pete Smith didn't bring up one position. And I think this is one position. And love Nick Chubb. He can stay here forever. But one position that we probably need to talk a tad bit about as well. We'll continue here. Your latest Locked On Browns. Everybody stick around. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you are stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn the rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards come in. Okay, real talk. We've all been there. Feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Bilt Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Bilt. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can now also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. So start earning points with your rent payments today. Jeff Lloyd, your host, Pete Smith from the OBR here as well. Your latest Locked On Browns. Pete, we talked a lot last draft season about running backs, and I think this is the one area, and you saw it yesterday. Granted, it was only 14 points, but 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. You have, and I'm not saying we're not going to bring in another wide receiver, but I think the glaring hole right now, and look, offensive line, I completely agree with you. It is the band. It all works in unison. You have to make the harmony together. But you look at this running back room, and again, if Nick Chubb wants to come back, I am all for that. I think everybody's all for that. But it needs a little juice in that running back room. You look at some of these teams in the NFL, the dominant team right now, like the Detroit Lions, 2 different versions of running backs that get it done on a consistent basis. This is something that probably needed to be addressed maybe last year, but certainly is going to be needed to be addressed this year.
Yeah, so obviously that starts with the offensive line. You mentioned the Detroit Lions. That's first and foremost what they get right.
Kevin Zeitler's still mauling dudes.
Yeah, he's like 45 years old, and and John Dorsey still hasn't called to let him know that the Browns are moving on from him.
He was busy. He was at the movies.
Yeah. In any case, look, last year's running back class wasn't great. Certainly there were guys I really liked, like Audric Estime, who's doing pretty well for himself this year.
Yeah, that worked out.
But I think the class this year is far better than it was last year, loaded with talent. And I'm not suggesting the Browns need to go up and get one early. I guess they could. And I think there's a compelling argument based on what we've seen this year that both what I would call playmaking offensive linemen have more value now than they have in past years. I would say Penei Sewell is in that category of a guy who is a playmaker. He is able to do so much that he just is able to, if you get into war and those things, he like crushes that. But I also think this year has highlighted, and I think will enhance the value. Ultimately, we'll see where this goes, of the superstar franchise running back. I don't know that we're going to see a ton of money spent on it, but I think the Eagles right now have to be really happy with the deal they got for Saquon Barkley. And I think you're going to see, because of the amount of teams who are wanting to play too high and keep things bottled up and limit the deep plays and all this, it gives the superstar running back has more value, because if he can break plays open, if he can make the offensive line look better than they were, which is something Nick Chubb, when he was before this latest injury, had always done, it makes your team infinitely better. And now, if you force the opponent to now play at one high or have to be far more concerned about stopping the run, then you have a massive advantage, and it opens up the rest of the offense. So you don't necessarily have to do that early in the draft. There are going to be plenty of people who are arguing for the Ohio State running backs or Ashton Genty and going, well, what could that guy do? But I think you're going to see the talent on this draft class goes deep at running back. Like, just casually watching the kid from Washington, University of Washington, is really interesting to me. The dude from Rutgers, who's just a tank, Kyle Monungai, is a really good running back. There are tons of these guys in this class that I think would have gone much earlier than last year's class. And the Browns, who are slated to have 11 picks, it becomes pretty easy for them to potentially pluck one of those guys. Having said all that, I really like what Jerome Ford does. I like him a lot better right now, where he gets to be sort of working off of Nick Chubb. And I thought they worked well, even though we didn't see a ton of production on the ground from the Browns against the Saints. I think you saw a 3 sort of carry glimpse of the old Nick Chubb, where he went 27 yards over 3 carries, and it helps to set up the Browns' second touchdown. Mm-hmm. But Jerome Ford out of the backfield is really good. Now, so you're still sitting there going, hey, if I can get more of this, if I can just continue to add to the rotation and get more players that can do more things that make the offense better, the team is just better for it. So that's going to be the question. What do they really want in that position? How does it really, how does it look? I think that's going to be interesting, but I don't think you're going to be short on guys. I don't think it's going to be nearly as sort of desperate or lacking options that it did this past year, where people are trying to talk themselves into running backs going far earlier than maybe they otherwise should, based on physical tools or whatever. So like the kid out of Texas, Carolina still has not activated him, and maybe they're doing it this week.
It's the rumor.
he went in the second round, and I think he's a very talented back, but it just goes to show you that the supply issue was real last year. I think this coming year. I know in terms of draft strategy, I talked about this in terms of like some of these other drafts. 2023, I think the Browns did a really good job with this in terms of setting themselves up to get like picking positions that were sort of marginal or had a lot of density sort of day three, and they just sort of planned their roster to sign guys after the draft. And then that year they got Ronnie Hickman and Mahmoud Diabate, which have been really good pickups for that. Would not shock me if the Browns take a similar approach to running back. Certainly that would make a whole lot of people happy that they're waiting till undrafted free agency. But my point is there are that many backs where you could potentially get somebody who, we'll see where it shakes out and who declares and who does all those things. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's guys who get picked up after the draft that are as good as guys you were going to talk about in round 4, which is literally the situation we saw with Ronnie Hickman, where there were a whole lot of people saying, hey, take Ronnie Hickman in round 4. The Browns got him after the draft. Take Mahmoud Diabate, similar situation. Now looking back, you certainly would go, oh, he should have been drafted here. Running backs in the same deal. But yes, I think not only, with the way the Browns have changed their offense, which I still think was good and necessary, regardless of the Deshaun Watson element, I think this gives them more opportunity to see what they want to fit in terms of style and all those things. And obviously, I think if the Browns were to do a great job, some of these things will be done in free agency since it comes before the draft, really bolstering that offensive line. Let's say they get a nice free agent center or a starting capable guard, whatever, and then they're able to continue to add to that in the draft, and you get a running back. I think those things will look better sort of paired up, but we'll see where it goes. I mean, the fact of the matter, I agree with you. I don't think the Browns are ever going to close the door on Nick Chubb. I think they will happily re-sign him. And I still like Jerome Ford. And then being able to get a guy where you're not expecting him to come in and dominate. He can be sort of either a cog or a nice surprise. That's the situation you want. You want to end up in a situation like the 49ers are in, where I don't even know the kid's name at this point, Watson or whatever. He wasn't the guy they drafted to be the dude. They drafted other people ahead of him. And This guy sort of popped out and became great. And all these people looking at all these other backs going, well, they've basically drafted really poorly at that position relative to impact. And then they just sort of found guys. I think that's where the Browns are going to be at their best if they can get in that scenario where they are just sort of picking guys where they can be a nice surprise, as opposed to, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it just doesn't feel like this is who this franchise is, to take somebody in like the second round and go, we need you to be the dude.
No, I agree. And honestly, there's going to be certain players that give you that vibe that can be the dude. But the problem is once you have the dude, what do you do when you don't have the dude? And that becomes a problem. So the idea is strength in numbers. And the ideally, that's where you want in every positional group on your roster. You want to have people that you have faith that you can play at any given time. Because as you've seen, certainly with Cleveland this year and many teams in the NFL, it is literally, truly one snap away before all of a sudden you're on your 2s, your 3s, your 4s, your 5s. You just have no choice. It's a difficult game. It's a violent game. It's a physical game. It's just the way it happens. He is Pete Smith, the OBR, the crew over the OBR. Pete, they're doing a ton of great work. In a season like this, some of the best work comes in a season like this. People flock to read about wins all day, every day. But when you got to, core through that apple and try to find the root of issues, or try to find what can be the change for franchises in seasons like the Browns are going for, that is the work that is truly be appreciated. And make sure you check out Pete, certainly, and the rest of everybody over at the OBR. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. Make sure you're following Pete as well at _Pete Smith _. We appreciate everybody makes the show their first listen every single day. The YouTube crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. Become a filthy animal. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go Browns.